Welcome back to the Spindle. Today we're chatting about something every milliner has come across at some point, choosing the right hat block. I'm joined by Darryl from Hat Blocks Australia, and together we're going to stir up a little sawdust and talk about putting together a block collection that really supports the way you create. Darryl, it's so lovely to have you here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
So great to see behind the scenes. We can see your setup in your workshop, and I'm going to ask you my favorite question to start with the spindle is, what are you currently working on, Darryl?
In the last week or two, we've had a pretty good mix of blocks for milliners and blocks for traditional hat makers. And coincidentally, there's been a few sets of what we call the Haim set come through in the orders. That's the Hat Academy Millinery Essentials set with the buttons and pillboxes and stuff. So it's good that we actually have a couple of those sets on hand to show you.
Absolutely. And they are the core products that we need generally when we start millinery, isn't it? So it's nice to see that we've got some people starting out and getting those little packs to get them kind of started. And what you can make from those basic shapes is infinitely, you can make so many different things. So when choosing your hat block, how helpful is it to begin with the end purpose in mind?
I think for a lot of beginners, they probably don't really have an end purpose. Perhaps it's a hobby they've just thought, oh, this looks fun, or I can jump into. Um, and that's why I actually do think that the millinery basics such as domes, cartwheel brims, buttons, and pillboxes, which is why Hat Academy originally put those kind of blocks together, is because if a milliner doesn't really, or a learner doesn't really know where they want their journey to go, they're always going to need those particular blocks. And like you said, they can make anything from those blocks. And that's their foundation, because I think once they've successfully mastered using them, making variations based on them, then they might go, okay, I think I know what direction I'd like my millinery to go, and then start choosing blocks. But they will always come back to those types of blocks because that's the foundation of millinery.
I remember I ordered a dome and a cartwheel brim, and then I got some little button blocks and I expanded from there. So you're so right. It's critical to try those first samples, get a feel for it, make a full on hat, make a cocktail hat, make something, using the dome, you can make little cocktail pieces that can be easily attached to the head. And then slowly but surely figure out what millinery style is yours. So I absolutely love that advice. It's a great point to start with.
Yeah, because the skills that will go into blocking a simple pillbox or a button, as you would know, Sophie, once you say, oh, I'm going to be a bit braver and do something that's got some shape in it,
Yes.
the basic principle is still the same.
Mhm.
It's draping, it's blocking. The only difference is now you have to add some extra skills to, on how to get some of the more complex shapes. But
Yeah.
you can't, you need the foundations to then move on to something else. Unless you're like Renee, who will just jump in and say, that most complicated block there, I want to make that as a hat, which is
Absolutely.
done before.
A bit of column A and a bit of column B. I do remember being quite ambitious when I was starting out. So while I got the basics, I did get a few little complicated ones as well. And I think it's really good to stretch your boundaries and find those limits. Thank you for showing us those examples of some gorgeous pieces. So when milliners are choosing a hat block, how important is sizing? What do people sometimes misunderstand or don't think about sizing because they just don't have any experience with the actual idea of a hat block? Can you talk about some sizing issues or things to note when choosing hat blocks?
Most of the time, people are familiar with things such as the size there. This particular one is 22-inch, and that's going to relate to circumference of that. So that's the inside, that becomes the inside of the hat. And if you're going to add Petersham ribbon on the inside there for a bit of a sweatband or something like that, it really doesn't take up a lot of space. But But if some milliners are beginning to branch out into traditional style hats like fedoras and things like that, and then they're choosing to use a leather sweatband. So you actually have to remember to use a block that's a whole size bigger than your finished hat, because the leather sweatband takes up so much extra room that it will reduce the hole to go over the head. But one of the other challenges is with blocks that have got an underside, because I don't know if you can read in there, I think it says oversize 59 up here, because when this is actually blocked, the felt or the straw is going on the inside edge. So the thickness of that felt all the way around becomes the hat size.
Yes.
So in the case of this, if you were to want this to fit a 59 centimeter head, this is probably more like 60 or 60 and a half a hole. So you can sometimes measure a block and say, oh, that's wrong. The block's not the right size, because the block can be stamped to represent the hat size, sometimes not the head size.
Absolutely.
And we face a similar challenge with puzzle blocks, is because this, when you're blocking, is the outside of the hat. But once you take it off and you turn that back up inside, this outer becomes the inner.
Yeah.
That make sense?
Absolutely.
So the block size itself is 56 centimeters, but it will make a 58 hat.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes the head fit can be affected by the choice of fabrics that people are wanting to use as well. So quite often we'll jump on a video call and talk about some of those nuances. But yeah, size is not always the finished size.
You know, it's really important that people keep in mind that you're working with a product that is a fixed texture and shape, and it's solid, right, Darryl? So you can only do the best that you can to give us accurate blocks. But it comes down to the milliner as the next step to control what materials and what choices they're making on the fabrication to make sure that the hat can still fit the customer. So always keeping your end purpose in mind when you're creating, because something like cinema is going to be a lot thinner than something like a really thick Western weight felt or something like that. So definitely something, there's a lot of things to keep in mind when you're a milliner, and it can be a bit overwhelming when you're a beginner. That's why it's so great, Darryl, that we can have you here to chat about it, because I do recall when I first started, I was like, a hat block, what on earth is that? Where do I start? So that's great to kind of take us through the couple of examples that you've got there. At what point does it make sense for a milliner to invest in a custom block?
Time to invest in a custom block would be when you've got enough experience under your belt and you want to perhaps push your boundaries and your skills. And a custom block can be something that you've looked at one of our products and said, I really like that, but I'd like some changes.
Yeah.
And then we can tweak and work with that. And the other side of a custom block is the milliner comes to us with their idea, their concept, and says, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is what I want. And then that leads down a whole nother rabbit hole that I'm sure we'll go down in a minute.
Yep, you're answering the next question that I have burning for. So, when someone is ready for a custom block, what is the best way for us as a milliner to present the ideas to you?
The preferred way ultimately is a physical three-dimensional sample.
Yes.
The worst way is to say, I want a block, it's kind of round and it's got this swoop and this
Yep.
groove, and it's got this exotic twist. And then I'm like, I have no idea how to
Yeah, that
interpret
could
that.
mean 10 different things,
Right.
couldn't it?
So I've got some examples of a number of different ways that we get, because my job is to get inside the milliner's head and what
Yep.
is their vision. Sometimes that can be working from photographs, and they say, this is the concept I want. Send me a
Yeah.
picture of 6 different hats and say, I'm after this kind of concept, not a copy of a hat, but a concept. But
Yes.
I'll run you through some of the ways that we get the ideas out of the heads. I'll start with paper schematics. So these are some of my workshop schematics, just so as an example. But so there's drawings,
Yeah.
and I try to explain to people that everything has to fit inside a rectangle box or a square box. I'm always asking, how wide is it, how tall is it, and how long is it? So,
Yeah.
for example, if that was sitting inside the box, it might be, I'll just guess rather than grabbing tape, it might be 6 inches across that way, and it might be 7 inches that way, and it might be 3 inches tall.
Yeah.
So I'll very often ask people, well, what's the physical dimensions of this object? Because then everything has to take place inside that cube of timber. They've got to have some drawing skills so that because I will very often on a video call do scribbles and say, is this what you mean? Is this what you mean?
Yeah.
And adjust lines. But schematics is one way. It's not the best way. I use schematics for a lot of things.
Yeah.
But an example is, for example, is this one, which was a wireframe
Yeah.
that someone made up on a mannequin head or something, and they sent me that, and that is all I needed. That told me what sort of shape it was. It told me how tall it was. It told me how long it was, and it told me what kind of curves that they wanted. So that's a really good way. But some people say, oh, I just can't work with wire. Sometimes people will carve out of that florist foam, and it doesn't have to be. This is one I made years ago as a test,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be super smooth and accurate. Then this is polystyrene foam
Yeah.
that someone sent me, but at least that way I know what its shape and dimensions is. So this is a crown from a Japanese client, and that
Yeah.
is absolutely rock hard. So that didn't move at all when I'm trying to measure it and copy it. Sometimes if you send me a hat, I might say, look, you're not going to get it back. Like this one here, which was sent to us from a client in Japan.
Mhm.
And as you can see, I cut it in half. So I said, you're not going
Yeah.
to get your hat back.
Yeah.
But I was able to fill that with, because that's pretty stiff. I
Mhm.
filled it with plaster of Paris, cut it off, and now I've got a solid representation, because
Yeah.
what this gives me is the inside of this shape. Because when I get sent a hat, I always have to remember that I have to make the inside of the hat, not the outside of the hat. Otherwise, it ends up too big and the features are not right. This is sort of not thermoplastic, but I can't think what it is. But that's blocked off of a vintage block. Someone said, "Oh, this is what I want." So the best way is always something that's tangible.
Yeah.
This cowboy hat got sent to me because they wanted to replicate the top and the shape, and this has been coated with fiberglass resin. So when I go to make all my measurements, nothing changes.
Because it's all very well and good to have a design in your head or create a design, but if it doesn't block well, then the point of the hat block is kind of, you know, not tried and tested. You want to get at something that you can have the end product in mind is what you were thinking. I know for me, I always like to, if I can now create something in some builder's foam, um, block it, test it out, wear the piece, make sure it's comfortable, make sure I'm happy, and then send it to you. Now, this block I've had for quite some time. It's getting very worn down, and I need to send it off to you, Darryl, so I can get a proper one made,
Right.
and maybe in a bigger size as well. But yeah, I think, being able to see, oh, okay, so the dome on the inside is this size, rather than just a picture. A picture says 1,000 words, but something in the flesh is
Right.
obviously much more helpful. But you have a great range of ready to go blocks and tried and tested designs as well. I know I've got some of my blocks of yours I've used a million times over and they're still going. And I've also got ones that you can use both sides as well. So it's a great investment. Speaking of an investment in your blocks, how should milliners think about their budget when they're starting to grow their block collection? What's your best advice for that?
Throw your budget out the window and buy everything. Um, think about using blocks, buying blocks that will be dual purpose. A number of milliners are wanting to get into, jump on the train of traditional hats, such as
Yep.
this one here.
Yeah.
Um, and you can get an open crown, which is a variation on a dome, right? But then you also have pre-shaped blocks.
Hmm.
Once it's blocked, to shape that by hand, right, they can make an infinite variety of shapes of hats, cowboy hats,
Yeah.
fedoras, drill beers, pot pies, whatever it is. But if they buy a pre-shaped, they will only ever do that. Again, you can make an endless variety of things off of those blocks, and
Yeah.
even just by blocking a part of it,
Yeah.
because you don't have to block all of that. You can block just that bit. A cartwheel brim, for example, that's the side that's most intended, but you can flip it over and then you've got a dead flat one. And
Yeah.
then you can put something like a pillbox on there and make a boater. But if you were to get a brim, for example, and it's got particular shapes to it, well, that's a one-off shape. Every time you block it, it's only going to be that. And if that's your signature shape, for example, that you really, really want to make over and over and over again, fast as you can, well, then you might get a block that is only in that dedicated shape. But always think about what it is else you can use it for.
Definitely something to keep in mind, if you're going to go the avenue of, you know, um, collecting blocks, make sure they're versatile. And, Daryl, you're so clever at being able to, create more than one use for a block. And it's a great way, to invest your money. And there's such a good investment because you will be able to block so many different hats out of it. So, I know when people are beginning, they're like, oh, they're quite expensive, but they're so well made. And if you take the time to really consider what you're investing in, you can kind of make sure they're absolutely going to, pay off a million times over. Those beautiful blocks are such a great investment and they are so well made. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. It's been such a great chat about choosing our hut blocks and how they can support all of the work that we do as milliners. We wouldn't be where we are without those beautiful blocks and you to make them. So, thank you everyone to listening. I hope this chat has given you a little inspiration as you think about your own block collection or dream up where the direction you want your block collection to go in. So, Darryl, is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up our chat today?
A really big thank you to the millinery and hat making world, because this started with Dad 99, 2000,
Yeah.
and I took it on in around 2011. And it's enabled us to, we can be flexible with our time to a certain degree and work from home. And we wouldn't have that existence without milliners and hat makers. So, a really big thank you to that community, because their support keeps bread and butter on our table.
Absolutely. I love that, Darryl. And I know, speaking from every milliner out there, we're very grateful for our hat block makers and we've got to continue to support them so that, we have them as a resource for us as well. So thank you so much, Darryl, for all, and Renee for all that you do. And until next time, happy hatting, and I'll see you again on the spindle.
Thank you.
What a great insight into choosing the right hat blocks for your designs. If you'd like to see more of their handcrafted hat blocks and tools, you can visit Hat Blocks Australia online at hatblocksaustralia.com.au.